My name is Talia Whitmore. I am 67 years old. For 45 years, I was a mother, a wife, a seamstress, the quiet foundation of a home that was never really mine. And on a cold Thursday morning, I learned that love does not guarantee a place to stay. The moment it happened, I was standing in the living room still wearing my apron. A half-dried dish towel was in my hand. My son's voice sliced the air like a knife. "If you will not go to a nursing home, then pack a bag and leave my house. Right now." House. His house. As if I had never been part of it. Lucas Carter, 42 years old. My only child. He looked at me as if I were a burden, not the woman who once worked double shifts just so he could join Little League baseball. I did not argue. I did not remind him that he did not buy this house. I did not remind him that it was purchased with the money I saved, stitching wedding dresses for half my life. I just stood there. Silence can be heavy. Silence can be sharp. Silence can be powerful. He expected a fight. He expected tears. Instead, I gave him none. "I said, pack your things," he shouted again, louder this time, as if volume could rewrite history. I set the towel down. I walked to the small guest room where I had been staying for the past 11 months. Suddenly, the space felt like a storage closet. No photos, no signs I existed. My name was nowhere in that house. I opened the old suitcase I brought when I moved in. The metal clasps creaked, tired from years of use. Inside the top drawer, wrapped in soft tissue paper, was a small linen handkerchief, white, with a shaky letter T stitched in bright blue thread. Lucas had embroidered it himself at school when he was 10 years old. He had proudly handed it to me on Mother's Day and said, "So you never forget that I love you." That was the day I swore I would always show up for him. I folded sweaters. I placed the handkerchief gently at the corner of the suitcase, letting my fingers rest on it for a moment longer than needed. It was the only thing that still felt like love. Upstairs, I could hear Lucas and his wife Brianna whispering, "We need her out. I am not turning my office into a guest room again. She had her life. This is ours." Had my life. The sentence echoed. When I zipped the suitcase, the sound felt like closure. I walked downstairs. Lucas was already standing at the door, arms crossed. "You're really leaving?" he asked. "Your words were very clear," I replied. Before he could speak again, the doorbell rang. He swung the door open, probably expecting the Uber I supposedly ordered, but the man standing outside was not an Uber driver. A long black limousine sat in the driveway, the morning light reflected on its polished surface. The door opened and an older man stepped out. His silver hair was combed neatly, dark navy suit, polished shoes, calm authority. Samuel Grant, 70 years old, founder of Grant Development Group, one of the largest real estate firms in the city. He had been my late husband's closest friend, and once, long ago, he had been in love with me. I never knew. Not until later. Lucas blinked. His confidence drained from his face. "Mr. Grant, what are you doing here?" Samuel did not look at him. He looked at me. Only me. As if the world had stopped rotating and we were the only two people on the porch. "Talia," he said softly, "I am here to take you home." Home. A word Lucas had just stripped from me. I took a slow breath and stepped past my son. The morning air was cold. It tasted like freedom. Lucas reached out, his voice suddenly unsure. "Mom, wait, we can talk about this." For the first time, I looked him in the eyes. Calm, steady. "Silence," I said quietly, "is also an answer." I climbed into the limousine. The door closed with a soft thud. Not anger, not revenge, closure. When I left that house in the limousine, I thought silence would protect me from pain. But silence has an echo. It follows you, bouncing off the memories you cannot bury. That morning started like any other. I woke up before sunrise, the way I had since I was 20. The house was quiet, heavy with the kind of stillness that comes right before something breaks. I made coffee, careful not to make noise. I always tried not to disturb them, Lucas and Brianna. I had learned that peace in their house depended on my invisibility. The smell of coffee used to mean comfort. Now, it smelled like loneliness in a ceramic cup. I could hear them upstairs, two voices whispering, the rhythm sharp, impatient. I did not need to listen to know the subject was me. The walls of that house carried everything, even the words that were never meant to reach me. "Mom's room is perfect for the studio," Brianna said, her voice crisp like glass. "It has the best light, and I can film yoga content there. We can finally start the online store." Lucas hesitated. "You really think she'll agree?" "She will when you tell her. You're too soft sometimes." Too soft. The same boy who used to cry if I didn't sit beside his bed until he fell asleep. The same boy who once refused to go to school unless I packed his lunch with a handwritten note. I smiled faintly at the thought. Then the ache followed. Memories can be cruel that way. I poured the coffee into my cup, 1 sugar, no milk. I had stopped buying milk after Brianna told me it was a waste for someone who barely eats breakfast. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. I sat by the small window overlooking the backyard, the same yard where Lucas once built a crooked treehouse with his father. I used to bring them lemonade on hot days, listening to their laughter. Now the tree stood alone, and so did I. Their footsteps came down the stairs. Brianna's heels clicked like a metronome of irritation. Lucas followed, slower. I didn't look up. I knew what was coming. You can feel rejection before it's spoken. "Talia," Brianna began, using my name instead of Mom, as if she were drawing a line in permanent ink. "We need to talk." I kept stirring my coffee. "About what?" Lucas cleared his throat. "About the house." I raised my eyes slowly, meeting his gaze. He looked tired. No, not tired. Cornered. "What about it?" Brianna folded her arms. "We've been thinking. It's not good for you to live like this. You need more care, more friends your age. There's a wonderful retirement community near the lake. They have art classes, book clubs, nurses, everything." Her tone was sugar-coated, but her eyes were sharp. I smiled faintly. "And what would happen to my room?" Brianna didn't blink. "We'll turn it into a yoga studio. For my business." I looked at my son. "Your wife wants my room." Lucas sighed. "It's not like that, Mom. We just think you'll be happier somewhere with people around." "People like me?" I asked quietly. "Or people you don't have to see?" Silence. He avoided my eyes, staring instead at the floor he had never swept, at the counter I had cleaned every day. I stood, my knees stiff but steady. "I am not a piece of furniture to be moved when space runs out." Brianna laughed softly, nervous. "Don't be dramatic. We're trying to help you." "Help me," I repeated. The words tasted bitter. That was when Lucas snapped. "If you won't go to a nursing home, then pack a bag and get out of my house." The words hit harder than any hand ever could. I did not flinch. I did not cry. I just looked at him. And in that long, unbearable pause, something inside me died, quietly. Perhaps the illusion that love was unbreakable. He waited for me to yell, to protest, to remind him that this house was built on my labor, my sacrifices, my dreams. But I said nothing. I turned back to the table, finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, and placed it upside down in the rack. Every movement is slow, deliberate, the kind of calm that frightens people. Brianna muttered, "I told you she'd make this difficult." I opened the cupboard, took down my small tin box of tea bags, and slipped it into my handbag. The things we cling to, when everything else slips away, are always small. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft but steady. "I understand. You need space. Don't worry, I'll leave." Lucas looked startled. "Wait, you will?" "I will." I walked past them to the narrow hallway that led to my room. Each step sounded louder than the last. The walls seemed to close in, filled with the ghosts of birthdays and Christmases gone by. In that small room, I began to pack. Each piece of clothing folded with precision, as if order could protect me from heartbreak. My fingers brushed the embroidered T on the handkerchief. 10 stitches, uneven and imperfect, but it had meant everything once. As I packed, I whispered to myself, "Silence is also an answer." It became a mantra, steadying my hands. When I returned downstairs with the suitcase, Brianna was already scrolling through her phone, talking about paint colors for her new studio. Lucas stood by the window, facing away from me. "I'll be gone soon," I said. He turned. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I smiled gently. "And that's all right. It's better when people say what they truly feel." For a moment, he looked like the boy I once knew, the one who brought me wildflowers from the backyard. Then it was gone. The sound of a car horn outside broke the moment. "Your ride is here?" he asked. "Yes," I said, though I hadn't called anyone. I walked to the door, opened it, and saw the limousine waiting at the curb, black and gleaming under the morning light. When Lucas opened the door wider and saw the man stepping out, his face drained of color. Samuel Grant. Brianna froze, her phone slipping slightly in her hand. Mr. Grant nodded politely at them, then turned to me. "Talia, ready?" I lifted my suitcase. "Yes." Lucas reached for me, desperate now. "Mom, please. Let's talk." I paused, my hand on the doorframe. "Silence," I said softly, meeting his eyes, "is also an answer." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The cold air filled my lungs like clarity. The limousine door opened. I slid inside, leaving behind the echoes of words that would never be taken back. Inside the car, I exhaled for the first time in years. Some endings do not need witnesses. They only need courage. In the quiet of the limousine, the city slid by like a river of glass. My reflection hovered in the window, older than the girl I used to be, but still carrying her careful hands. When grief loosens its grip, memory steps in. It walks you back to rooms you thought were locked forever. I was 19 when I first learned to fit a bodice without pins. Mrs. Delgado, the tailor who let me sweep her shop for pocket change, stood behind me with her arms folded and a smirk that meant I was close. "Eyes, not hands," she said. "You measure with your eyes first. The tape only confirms what you already know." I wanted to be as precise as that sentence. I wanted a life that fit the people I loved. The first apartment my husband and I rented had a view of a brick wall. We loved it anyway. The floor creaked in a friendly way, as if it were practicing a song. I set up a secondhand machine on a folding table and stitched hems for neighbors. Little by little, they told friends, and friends told strangers. Word of mouth is a soft drumbeat. You only hear it if you are patient. When Lucas was born, I sewed while he napped, guiding fabric with one hand and rocking his bassinet with the other. The machine's hum became his lullaby. I learned to count by seams, to plan meals by delivery times, to hide my exhaustion with lipstick and a scarf. On Saturdays, I posted hand-lettered signs near the grocery store. Alterations, custom dresses, fast turnaround. My signatures were neat. My prices were kinder than they should have been. I dreamed of a shop with a window wide enough to hold a mannequin in a swan neck gown. The lease came sooner than I expected, the price higher than I could justify. But a stranger's kindness tipped the scale. A gray-haired man stopped in for a button repair and ended up telling me about a small storefront 2 blocks from the bus stop. "Good foot traffic," he said. "Terrible landlord, haggle him down." I did. When I turned the key for the first time, the bell above the door chimed like a blessing. I set out a jar of peppermint candies. Children remember sweetness longer than they remember prices. My husband was a gentle man who repaired vending machines and whistled without knowing it. He kept quarters in a coffee can and hoped for a clean shirt. We did not have much, but we had timing. When my first custom wedding dress order came in, he took the late shift so I could cut patterns at the table. He held the fabric to the light and said it shimmered like water. I decided to believe him. The shop grew in small, stubborn steps. I learned the names of bridesmaids and mothers. I learned that lace hides sins and truth alike. I kept a notebook of measurements, not just waist and hip, but details brides did not say out loud. Anxious sister, father in recovery, dress needed to make courage visible. My hands became translators. I told fabric what women could not bear to tell themselves. When Lucas started kindergarten, we shared a ritual that felt like a secret. On Fridays, I closed the shop 5 minutes early, bought him a bakery cookie, and walked the long way home so he could tell me one brave thing he had done that week. He always found something, raised a hand, shared a crayon, learned a new word. He did not know that I was learning bravery from him. The year he turned 11, my husband's chest pain began as a whisper and ended as a shout. A hospital room at 3 in the morning can make faith look like a vending machine that only takes tokens you do not have. The nurse adjusted the beeping. The doctor cleared his throat. The world rearranged itself without asking my permission. I went home with a pamphlet about grief and a bag of his clothes folded by a stranger. I pressed my face to his shirt until the scent faded. Then I pressed harder, as if pressure could bring him back. After the funeral, the rent came due. So did the taxes. So did the question of who I would be now. I hung a sign in the shop window that said, "Alterations while you wait." Then I learned to wait without falling apart. I packed Lucas's lunch with a note that said, "You are braver than this day." Then I learned to be braver than mine. Grief changed the sound of the sewing machine. It was no longer a hum, but a heartbeat I had to keep steady. In middle school, Lucas brought home a permission slip for a science camp he loved. The fee was cruel for a week of tents and microscopes. I told him we would find a way. Then I went to my bedroom and opened the jewelry box that had more air than gold. The wedding ring I had kept through lean years and busted pipes rested in a little velvet nest. It did not look like much, but it was my promise to a life that no longer existed. I took it to a pawn shop with quiet lighting. The man behind the counter weighed it without malice and slid me a number on a slip of paper. It was not enough, but it would do. I signed. He nodded. I walked home with a receipt that felt like a secret. Lucas went to camp. He came back taller, with a pocket full of rocks and a new word for sky. I never told him where the money came from. Some love is louder when it does not announce itself. When the shop finally had a slow season, I turned it into a classroom. I taught neighbors to hem pants. I showed a teen mother how to thread a bobbin with one hand while steadying a baby with the other. We mended what could be saved. We forgave what could not. On the good days, the bell above the door rang so often it sounded like laughter. On the hard days, I folded fabrics that no one came to claim and told myself that beauty is never wasted if someone made it with care. Time does not warn you when it starts subtracting more than it adds. Lucas grew into a man with an office job and good shoes. The shop turned profitable enough to silence the landlord. I pruned my roses on Sundays and ironed napkins for holidays. I believed a house could be a language that love speaks fluently. Then life cleared its throat again. Mothers are the last to know when their usefulness has been rebranded as clutter. In the limousine, I touched the corner of my bag where the handkerchief waited. White linen, blue thread, crooked T. My ring finger felt strangely light. I had long ago stopped reaching for what I had given away. Outside, traffic pooled and thinned. Inside, memory stitched me back together with the same small, stubborn thread it had always used. I did not regret the ring. I regretted that sacrifice had been seen as silence rather than love. But even silence has a language. I was finally learning to speak it on my own behalf. After that drive in the limousine, I stayed for a few days at Samuel's guest apartment downtown. The city noises came in through tall windows, traffic, footsteps, sirens, but none of them hurt as much as the silence that used to live in my son's house. Even noise, I learned, can be kinder than indifference. I remember the weeks leading up to that morning with painful clarity, as if the air itself had been warning me. The signs had been small, polite, and merciless. It started with a change in the dinner routine. We used to eat together, all four of us, Lucas, Brianna, little Aiden, and me. It was never fancy, just roasted chicken, salad, something simple. I would set the table, fold napkins the way my mother once did, small triangles like sails. But slowly, dinner became date night or takeout night, or we already ate earlier, Mom. I started keeping leftovers in the fridge like messages no one would ever read. I remember one evening in particular. The kitchen smelled of lemon soap and roasted garlic. I was washing the last plate when I heard Brianna's voice coming from the living room. I didn't mean to listen, but the walls were thin and my heart traitorous. "She's still here," Brianna said, her tone light but sharp at the edges. "Everywhere I look, her stuff is there. The photos, the tea set, her plants. It's like the house can't breathe." Lucas sighed. "She doesn't have anywhere else to go." "She could. There's that senior place by the lake. I showed you the brochure. It would be better for her, better for us. She means well, but she's exhausting. I feel like a guest in my own home." A pause. Then Brianna added, quieter but clearer than glass, "Having her here makes us suffocate." The word hit like a hand against my chest. I stared at the dish in my hands, the soap bubbles collapsing slowly around my fingers. I didn't drop the plate. I just stood there, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. Through the reflection in the window, I could see them on the couch, close together. Brianna's legs tucked under her, Lucas rubbing his temples. They looked like a painting of comfort I no longer belonged to. I finished washing the plate, placed it carefully in the rack, and dried my hands. Everything slowed down. The clock ticked once, twice. The faucet dripped once, twice. In that rhythm, I found a strange peace. Pain moves slower when you accept it. Aiden ran in just then, his socks sliding across the tile. "Grandma," he shouted, arms wide, "can you read me the bear story again?" I knelt down, hugging him tightly. His hair smelled like bubblegum shampoo. "Of course," I whispered. "The one where the bear learns to be brave?" He nodded eagerly. "That one. Mommy says I should sleep now, but you tell it better." I smiled. "That's because I know all the secret parts." He laughed, a sound so pure it almost erased the sting of the conversation I'd overheard. Almost. Later, as I tucked him into bed, he looked at me with sleepy honesty. "Grandma, this house is happy when you're here. Mommy and Daddy don't smile when you're gone. The truth children speak has no agenda. It lands straight in your soul." I kissed his forehead and said, "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." When I closed his door, I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the framed photos along the wall. Each one was a memory with soft edges. Lucas's graduation, the day Aiden was born, the family barbecue where I had cooked all day, but stood in none of the pictures. My face had been disappearing long before they asked me to leave. One afternoon, Brianna announced she was redecorating the living room to make it brighter. She removed the lace curtains I had sewn, replaced them with gray blinds. The framed photo of Lucas at 10, the one I had kept in the corner near the piano, vanished. I found it later in the garage, face down in a box labeled miscellaneous. It wasn't malice, not exactly. It was something colder, convenience. I had become an inconvenience wrapped in politeness. The next Sunday, while Brianna hosted her yoga group in the yard, I baked a pie for Aiden. The smell of apples and cinnamon drifted outside, and he came running to the kitchen window, waving. "Can I have some now?" he asked. Brianna called from behind him, "After class, honey. Grandma's busy." But I wasn't. I never was, not in their eyes. I sliced the pie anyway, kept a piece warm under foil for him. Later that night, when the house quieted, Aiden tiptoed into my room. "Did you save it?" he whispered. "Yes," I said, lifting the foil. His face lit up like the first light after rain. As he ate, I realized that love, when given to a child, always finds a place to live, even if the adults around them forget how. Still, every day brought a new sign that I was no longer part of the living fabric of their life. Invitations to family dinners went from assumed to optional to forgotten. I became background noise, familiar but ignorable. One morning, I found my sewing machine unplugged and pushed into the closet. "It takes too much space," Brianna said when I asked. "We're filming videos for my yoga brand. The humming distracts me." I didn't argue. I carried the machine to the garage and covered it with a cloth, the same cloth I had used when Lucas was a baby to shield him from sunlight. I remember thinking, maybe mothers and machines share the same fate, useful until replaced by convenience. That night, I dreamt of my old shop, the smell of fabric, the chime of the door, the women who had trusted me with their joy. I woke up before dawn, heart aching for a sound that no longer existed, Aiden found me in the kitchen an hour later, staring at the untouched coffee. "Grandma," he said, climbing onto the chair beside me, "why are you sad?" "I'm not sad," I lied. "Just thinking." He studied me, serious beyond his 6 years. "About what?" "About how people forget what made them happy," I said softly. He nodded, as if he understood. Then, with the fierce certainty only a child can have, he said, "I won't forget you." That morning, I decided not to cry anymore. Tears could not rebuild what silence had already dismantled. When I look back now, those days were the beginning of my erasure, the quiet turning of a page that no one else noticed. Yet even then, Aiden's laughter, his small hands reaching for mine, reminded me that not everything I had built had vanished. Some legacies survive through tenderness, some through truth, and some, like me, through endurance. The limousine idled at the curb like a black comma, a brief pause before my life rewrote its next sentence. I was still holding the handle of my suitcase when Lucas opened the door wider, expecting a rideshare driver and a quick goodbye. What he saw instead drained the certainty from his face. Samuel Grant stepped out first. The driver hovered behind him with the practiced discretion of someone who knows when silence carries more weight than greeting. Morning light slid along the car's polished edge. I saw my own reflection there, small, steady, unafraid. "Mr. Grant," Lucas said, voice tight, "what are you doing here?" Samuel adjusted his cuff. It was an old habit, a tiny rehearsal for the authority that followed. "Good morning, Lucas. I came for Talia." Brianna was halfway down the hall, phone in hand, dressed in tight athleisure that looked expensive and impatient. "Is this a joke?" she asked. "We have a schedule." Samuel's eyes did not move to her. He looked past my son and daughter-in-law and found me, the way a lighthouse finds a ship that refuses to admit it is lost. "If you are ready, we will go." I lifted the suitcase. The wheels clicked once across the threshold. Lucas blocked the path with an arm that used to lift me from lawn chairs when my knees protested. "You cannot just take her." Samuel's voice stayed gentle. The steel lived under the velvet. "I am not taking her. She is leaving." Brianna stepped forward. "This is our house." Samuel glanced at the hallway gallery of photos, then at the baseboards I had scrubbed 100 times. His gaze returned to Lucas. "Not everything in this house belongs to you." The sentence settled in the air. It did not raise its voice. But I watched it land on Lucas like the realization that a map he trusted had mislabeled the compass. He tried to recover. "You knew my father, Sam," he said, as if that alone might return balance to the room. "You did work together once, right?" Samuel nodded. "Your father was the best ethical negotiator I ever met. He refused to win a deal if it cost a person their dignity. We built more than buildings. We built reputations that could pay interest longer than money can." Something flickered behind Lucas's eyes. Admiration, grief, maybe shame. "He never mentioned you by name." "That was his modesty," Samuel replied. "Or perhaps his protection. Men of that era believed private loyalty was stronger than public credit." Brianna crossed her arms. "We do not need a history lecture. We have plans. We are converting her room into a studio. We have brand commitments." The word brand echoed against the word dignity in my head. One sounded like plastic, the other like oak. Samuel's attention never hardened. It simply focused. Plans are often most dangerous when the cost is paid by someone else. Lucas exhaled hard. "This is not your concern." "On the contrary," Samuel said, "it became my concern the moment you tried to evict a woman from a house she financed, the moment you mistook her quiet for permission." Lucas flushed. "She's better off in a community where people can watch her. We are busy." "I can see that," Samuel replied. "Busy is not the same as responsible. Noise is not the same as care." Behind Lucas, a small shape appeared at the top of the stairs, Aiden, hair mussed from sleep, hugging a stuffed bear that had survived more laundry cycles than some marriages. He blinked down at us. "Grandma?" I raised my hand. "I am here, sweetheart." Brianna spun. "Back to your room. Now." "Grandma is leaving." "Why?" he asked. No one answered him. So I did. "Because I am going somewhere I can breathe." Aiden's mouth trembled. He started down the steps, one careful foot at a time. Children know how to move through tension the way cats do, quietly alert to every sound. When he reached the landing, he ran the last 3 steps and wrapped his arms around my waist. "The house is happy when you are here." Brianna's jaw clenched. "Aiden!" Samuel crouched so he was eye level with the boy. "Do you like stories?" he asked. Aiden nodded, suspicious and curious at once. "Here's a short one," Samuel said. "Once there was a house that forgot who kept it warm. When the warmth left, the house wondered why winter came inside." Aiden looked up at me. "That is a sad story." "It will get better," I said, and kissed his hair. "Stories do when people tell the truth." Lucas shifted his weight. The floorboard under his heel squeaked, a small confession. "Mom, if you leave like this, neighbors will talk." "Neighbors already talk," I said. "They just whisper kinder than we do." Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Huang, had stepped onto her porch to water a pot of rosemary. She paused, hose dangling, water pooling at her feet. She lifted 2 fingers in a respectful hello toward Samuel, and then toward me. She had the grace to pretend she had not heard a thing. Witnesses, I thought, are angels who do not interfere. Samuel straightened and offered me his arm. "We should not be late," I nodded, then turned to my son. This was not a speech. It was a measure. "When your father died, grief taught me to carry 2 truths at once. Love can be real. Love can also be clumsy. I will not punish you for being clumsy, but I will not live inside it." He swallowed. "Are you saying you will not forgive me?" "I am saying forgiveness without boundaries is not forgiveness. It is permission." Brianna sighed dramatically. "We do not have time for this." Samuel's gaze moved to her for the first time. He did not raise his voice. "You made time to remove her curtains. You can spare a minute to hear her finish a sentence." Brianna looked away. I tightened my grip on the suitcase. The handkerchief with the blue T lay at its corner. I could feel its small softness through the fabric lining. "Lucas," I said, "you were born into my arms and into my promises. One of them was that I would not let you become a man who confuses power with care. I am keeping that promise today by walking away." He took a step toward me, then stopped. Samuel's driver had opened the rear door of the limousine. Air from the car's interior drifted out, faint leather, a whisper of citrus. It smelled like rooms where decisions are made after the shouting stops. Samuel spoke one last time, measured and final. "Talia, your seat." I turned to Aiden. "I will call later," I said. "Save me a brave story for tonight." He nodded fiercely, then, in a hushed urgency, "I hid your tea tin under the pantry shelf so Mommy would not throw it away." I smiled. A 6-year-old had offered me a lifeboat. "Thank you for saving what keeps me warm." I stepped past Lucas. He did not block me this time. At the curb, Samuel stopped. The moment thinned, stretched, asked for a truth. He looked at Lucas and gave him one more line to carry. "A house is worth what it protects. Decide what yours protects." Lucas stared at the threshold as if the wood might answer on his behalf. I slid into the car. The door thudded shut, soft and complete. The driver eased us from the curb. Through the tinted glass, I watched the porch shrink, then tilt, then vanish behind a turn in the street. My heart did not race. It kept a steady, working woman rhythm I recognized, the old machine humming again, this time for me. Samuel did not speak immediately. He let the quiet expand until it felt like a room I could live in. Finally, he said, "If I overstepped, I will apologize." "No," I answered. "You named something that had lost its name." "What is that?" "Respect." He nodded once, the way men do when they accept a verdict they already knew. "We will stop by my office first," he said. "There are documents your husband asked me to safeguard. I suspect you were never shown them." I turned from the window. "Documents?" His eyes held mine. They had the steady light of someone who manages storms without announcing the forecast. "Yes, your husband left provisions. Not everything in that house belongs to your son." The limousine accelerated. Morning widened into day. I rested my palm on the suitcase and felt the raised threads of the blue tea through the lining. Somewhere behind us, a child stood at a window holding a secret tea tin. Somewhere ahead, a room waited where truth would finally be printed in ink. Silence, I said, half to myself, half to the city passing by, is also an answer, but so is paper. Samuel allowed himself the smallest smile. Then let us go find yours. The elevator glided upward without sound, carrying me higher than I had ever lived. Floors blinked past in gold light, 36, 37, 40, until the doors opened to a hallway hushed like a library. The carpet muted every footstep. Even the air felt polite. Samuel led me to a glass door at the end. When he turned the handle, sunlight rushed in, unfiltered, and the city unfurled below us like a confession. "This is temporary," he said, "until we sort through the documents." Temporary. That word used to mean uncertainty. Now it felt like mercy. The penthouse stretched wide and open, all windows and quiet lines. No clutter, no echo of raised voices, only the hum of distant traffic softened by glass. A single orchid stood on a marble counter, white and still as breath. I had never been in a room that didn't need me to tidy it. "Sit," Samuel said, pointing to a chair near the wall of glass. "You look like you've been standing guard for years." I smiled faintly. Maybe I have. He walked to a small cabinet and took out a tin of loose tea leaves. "Jasmine. Your husband always said it reminded him of early mornings in Bangkok." I blinked. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything that matters," he said simply. Steam rose as he poured the hot water over the leaves. The scent filled the air. Clean, floral, almost shy. He handed me a porcelain cup with both hands, as if offering not tea but permission to rest. "Drink slowly," he said. "You don't have to rush through good things anymore." I held the cup near my face, watching the ripples calm. The heat moved through my fingers into my chest. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Outside, clouds drifted across the skyline. Inside, I could finally hear the small noises of living, the ticking of a clock, the soft whistle of the kettle cooling, the sound of my own breath that no one mocked or hurried. I thought, to be treated kindly feels foreign, almost suspicious. After a while, Samuel sat across from me. His posture was relaxed but deliberate, like a man who had spent decades navigating boardrooms yet never forgot how to listen. "You still sew?" he asked. "Not recently. My machine's in the garage." "That's a crime," he said, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Hands like yours shouldn't retire before you do." I looked down at them, the fingers calloused in soft crescents, a small burn mark from an iron years ago. They're good at fixing things that don't want to stay fixed. "That's a gift," he said. "The world is held together by people who mend quietly." The conversation drifted, easy and unforced. He told me about his gardens in upstate New York, about losing his wife 8 years ago to illness, about how loneliness can masquerade as self-sufficiency. I listened, surprised by how natural it felt to be spoken to like an equal, not a responsibility. At some point, he opened a folder on the table. Inside were several documents, crisp and heavy with embossed seals. "These," he said, "are the assets your husband placed in trust before he died, a portion of his shares in our company and a small property in Vermont." I stared at the papers as if they might dissolve. "He never told me." "He wanted to," Samuel said, "but illness came too quickly. He asked me to make sure you'd be secure. Your son was still in school then. He didn't want him burdened with managing it. The trust matured last year. You're entitled to every cent." The words felt unreal. I had spent years budgeting coupons, afraid of hospital bills, apologizing for every grocery trip, and all this time stability had been waiting behind a locked drawer. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just promise you'll let yourself rest before deciding what comes next." The promise was harder than it sounded. Rest had always felt like idleness, and idleness like guilt. I nodded anyway. After he left me to unpack, I wandered through the penthouse. The master bedroom faced east. When I drew the curtains, the afternoon sun painted the floor in long gold stripes. A soft breeze slipped through a cracked window, carrying the faint hum of the city below. I opened my suitcase carefully. On top, folded small, was the handkerchief with the blue tea. I set it on the dresser. It looked almost out of place in this world of glass and silver. Yet somehow it belonged more here than it ever did on Lucas's nightstand. In the kitchen, I found fresh fruit arranged in a white bowl and a note in Samuel's careful handwriting. "Tea at 6. You deserve good company." I smiled at the simplicity of it. I had not been someone deserving in a long time. The hours passed softly. I read, napped, let silence move through me without fear. When evening came, the city lights below flickered on, one by one, tiny prayers against the dark. Samuel returned with a small bag of groceries and a carton of milk. "I remembered you take 1 sugar, no milk," he said, "but you should have the choice." Choice. Such a simple word, but it opened a door inside me. We ate in the kitchen, not the dining area, because real conversations never happen across marble, as he put it. He asked nothing invasive. He just listened while I spoke of the shop I once had, the women who came to mend their dresses and left lighter. At one point I said, "Being treated with care feels strange. I keep waiting for the cost." He set down his cup. "Kindness isn't debt, Talia. It's recognition." I looked at him for a long moment. "Recognition of what?" "Of worth," he said simply, "and of time served in silence." His words found a quiet space inside me and stayed there. After dinner, I stood by the window again. The city pulsed with light. Cars moved like veins carrying determination through the streets. Below, people hurried to their lives. Up here, time slowed enough to let gratitude catch up. Samuel joined me, 2 cups of tea, in hand. "I learned to make it the way you like," he said, "less steeped, lighter." The steam rose between us, fragrant and fragile. We stood side by side, saying nothing. The kind of silence that holds, not hurts. In the reflection on the glass, I saw us, an aging woman rediscovering the dignity of being seen, and a man who understood that rescue could be quiet. For the first time in years, I felt no urge to explain myself, no pressure to shrink to fit a space. The room didn't need me to prove my worth. It simply offered a chair and waited. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded different, less guarded, almost peaceful. I'd forgotten what sunlight on glass sounds like. Samuel looked at me with the faintest smile. "Then remember it. You're allowed to start collecting new sounds." I nodded. Outside, the horizon blushed with the last streaks of day. Inside, I let the warmth of tea and safety fill the empty corners of my chest. For the first time, the air around me felt like something I was allowed to keep. It happened 3 mornings later. I was sitting by the window with my tea, watching the city stretch awake, when Samuel entered the room with a look I couldn't quite read. Not alarmed, more like a man who had discovered something that would shift the ground beneath us all. Behind him came another man, younger, suited, calm in that careful way lawyers are trained to be. "Talia," Samuel said, "this is Andrew Moss. He's our corporate counsel. There's something we need to show you." I set the cup down, still steaming. "Something about the trust?" Samuel shook his head. "About your house." My pulse tightened. "The one Lucas lives in?" "Yes," Andrew said, sliding a folder from his briefcase. "We ran a property trace, partly to verify your assets for the trust. And we found something surprising." He opened the folder. Inside was a printed record with official seals, my name typed neatly across the top. Property owner, Talia Whitmore. Address, 41 Rosemont Avenue. My breath caught. There must be a mistake. I transferred everything to Lucas years ago. "You gave him authority to manage it," Andrew said carefully, "not ownership. The deed was never changed. You remain the sole legal owner." The words sank slowly, like ink spreading across water. I felt the world tilt, quietly, elegantly, but completely. "So," I said after a long moment, When he told me to leave, Samuel finished for me, voice low and steady. He was throwing you out of your own house. I closed my eyes. For a moment, there was only the hum of the city and the faint clink of the spoon in my untouched tea. My own son, my own home. Andrew continued, his tone cautious but factual. We also discovered a pending inquiry from a real estate agent in Lucas's email chain. He has been negotiating a private sale of the property. A buyer from Connecticut. The emails show intent to sell within 60 days. My hands went cold. He was going to sell it after I left. Yes, Samuel said. That's why he wanted you out fast. Andrew pushed another sheet across the table. This is the offer letter and a draft contract. It's unsigned, but the agent's email references that the current occupant, you, would be vacating soon. He referred to you as a tenant. Tenant. The word clawed at me. I whispered, he called me a tenant in my own house. Samuel's expression darkened in that quiet, dignified way only men of restraint can manage. That's fraud, Talia. You can sue or simply reclaim what's already yours. I stared at the window. The skyline was bright and distant, untouched by betrayal. I don't want revenge, I said. I just want the truth to exist somewhere outside my heart. Andrew nodded. The truth already exists in the county registry. It's a public record. What you choose to do with it is up to you. I stood and walked to the glass. 45 floors below, the city pulsed, tiny lives, tiny errands, none of them knowing that one quiet woman was reclaiming her existence without a single scream. Print everything, I said finally. Every file, every email, every timestamp. I want a complete record. Already done, Samuel said. It's on this drive. He handed me a small silver USB stick. And there's more. Your late husband left explicit instructions in the trust. If you ever lost possession of the house, it would revert automatically to you. That clause is still active. I turned toward him. He knew? He predicted it might happen someday, Samuel said softly. Not that your son would betray you, but that grief and greed sometimes confuse good people. He said you were the one with judgment. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My husband, gone 13 years, had already seen the storm and built me a shelter I never knew existed. I sat again, fingers trembling but steady enough to hold the papers. I spent years afraid of losing a home that was never lost. Samuel reached across the table, resting his hand near mine, but not over it. That's what good men do, Talia. They protect the quiet ones long after they're gone. Andrew gathered the papers back into order. We'll file a formal notice of ownership. The agent will be notified immediately. Legally, Lucas has no claim to sell or alter the property. Any attempt to do so will constitute fraud. I nodded. Do it. After Andrew left, the silence returned. Heavy, but not suffocating this time. The kind of silence that clears a room rather than fills it. Samuel poured more tea. You're taking this calmly. I smiled faintly. Anger is loud. Dignity doesn't need volume. He chuckled softly. Then you've mastered dignity. Or maybe I've just run out of breath to waste. He looked at me thoughtfully. What will you do next? I stared at the horizon. I think I'll visit my house. The next morning, we drove to Rosemont Avenue. The limousine's engine purred like a secret. The closer we got, the more the streets shrank back to the scale of my old life. Small front yards, mailboxes with peeling paint, children's bicycles leaned against fences, familiar and distant at once. When we pulled up, Lucas's car was in the driveway, curtains drawn. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Houses do that when you no longer live inside their lies. I didn't ring the bell. I simply stood at the sidewalk, looking at the walls I had painted, the window I once leaned from to watch him ride his first bike. Samuel joined me. You don't have to go in. I know. A movement at the window caught my eye. Brianna pulling back a curtain, then freezing when she saw the limousine. Lucas appeared behind her, his face pale. For a second, he looked like a boy again. Caught, frightened, not yet cruel. I didn't wave. I didn't glare. I just met his eyes. He opened the door, hesitant. Mom, not now, I said quietly. You'll hear from my lawyer." What does that mean?" "It means the house you tried to sell," I said, my voice even, "belongs to the woman you threw out of it." He stepped forward, but Samuel's calm presence beside me held him still. "Talia," Samuel murmured, "you don't owe him a speech." "I know," I said. Then to Lucas I added, "One day you'll learn that some things can't be sold. Not homes, not love, not decency." I turned back toward the car. Behind me, I heard the sound of the door closing, not a slam, just the soft, defeated click of realization. Back in the limousine, Samuel didn't speak until we reached the main road. "You handled that with grace." "I didn't handle it," I said. "Truth did. I just let it breathe." The skyline reappeared ahead, vast and glittering. I leaned my head back, eyes closed. For the first time in years, I felt something larger than anger settle inside me. Something like peace, or maybe justice disguised as quiet. "Con duime rakoi chinkanya med amua," I whispered in my native tongue. Not for him, but for myself. Samuel glanced over. "What did you say?" I smiled faintly. "A mother's truth. You don't need to translate it." Outside, the city kept moving, but for me, the world had finally stopped spinning. That evening, after the visit to Rosemont Avenue, I sat again by the window of the penthouse. The city was a sea of lights, steady and indifferent. Below, life pulsed on. Up here, it felt suspended, half dream, half reckoning. Samuel was in the kitchen pouring tea with the same precision he used for everything. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if giving gravity a chance to catch up. When he walked over, I noticed something new in his eyes, a hesitation I hadn't seen before. Not uncertainty, but weight. He handed me the cup and remained standing. "You look exhausted," he said. "Exhaustion is honesty wearing no makeup," I replied softly. He smiled faintly. "Then you've earned the right to be honest." I gestured toward the chair across from me. "You look like a man rehearsing a confession. Sit before you lose your courage." He laughed under his breath, but his shoulders eased as he sat. "You always read people too easily." "Comes from a lifetime of sewing," I said. "You learn to spot every loose thread." Silence fell again, a gentler one, the kind that waits, not demands. Finally, he spoke. "Talia, I should have told you this years ago, maybe decades." I set down the cup, steadying my hands. "Then it must be something worth hearing." He looked out at the city before finding my eyes again. "When I first met you, you were 27. Your husband, David, had just joined the firm. He was brilliant but quiet. You came to the office one afternoon to bring him lunch, and the whole room stopped breathing for a moment. You didn't even notice." I blinked, unsure how to bridge the years his words had suddenly erased. "That was a lifetime ago." He nodded. "And yet it still feels like yesterday to me. I fell in love with you that day." The words hung in the air like thunder, waiting for lightning. He didn't flinch, didn't try to soften them. He simply said them as if stating a fact that had waited too long for air. "You loved me," I repeated, not as a question but a quiet echo. "Yes," he said, "deeply, silently. I never spoke of it because you were already in love. With him. And because I saw that he loved you in return. That kind of love didn't need a third name to exist." I stared at the tea between us, the surface trembling faintly from the city's heartbeat. "You kept that secret all these years?" "I didn't keep it," he said. "I lived with it. There's a difference. Secrets rot. Love, if it's real, endures quietly." I felt a warmth. Not the burn of embarrassment or confusion, but something older, sadder, and strangely grateful. "Why tell me now?" "Because," he said, "life doesn't give many chances to tell the truth without needing something in return. And I wanted you to know, my being here now, helping you, has nothing to do with wanting to replace him." He leaned forward, his voice softer but firm. "I came because you deserve to be respected. Because I saw what you gave to that family and how the world forgot to give it back." I swallowed hard, unsure whether to smile or weep. "You always did have a gift for saying the one thing no one expects." "I learned that from your husband," he said with a wistful smile. He once told me, real love doesn't compete, it protects. The memory of David's laugh, his worn leather jacket, his smell of soap and engine, oil, all of it returned like a wave that doesn't hurt anymore, only cleanses. I whispered, he trusted you. And he was right to, Samuel said. Before he died, he made me promise something, that if you ever needed a friend who spoke truth without pity, I would be that person. He said you'd be too proud to ask. A soft ache unfurled in my chest. He knew me well. He did, Samuel said, and he admired that pride. He told me it was the same pride that kept him from despair when he got sick. I turned to the window again. The city lights blurred through the sheen of unshed tears. You could have told me earlier, I said, voice trembling slightly. I could have, he admitted. But it would have burdened you. You were happy. I didn't want to stain that. Some truths have to wait until they can heal instead of harm. I studied his face, the deep lines, the silver at his temples, the kindness that time had not eroded. And now, does this truth heal you? He smiled, faint and resigned. It does, because I'm not saying it to win you. I'm saying it to honor what was always there, respect. That's rarer than love, Talia. For a long moment, I said nothing. My heart felt like a room someone had just opened after years of being locked. Dust motes floated in the new light. Finally, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. You're right, I said. Respect is rarer. And I think it's the one thing I forgot to demand from life. He turned his palm upward, not gripping, just meeting. Then let this be your reminder. The clock ticked faintly between us. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled, distant but clear, as if the sky itself was acknowledging the truth at last. Funny, I murmured. A lifetime ago, you loved me quietly. And now, you're teaching me how to live quietly, too. Maybe it's symmetry, he said. The universe is finally balancing its accounts. I laughed softly. You sound like David when you say things like that. Then maybe I'm just borrowing his wisdom for one last good deed. I looked at him then, not as the man who once loved me, not as the rescuer who found me, but as a mirror reflecting the woman I had almost forgotten existed, a woman still capable of being seen, not pitied. When the rain began, we didn't close the windows. The sound filled the penthouse, steady, cleansing. I watched drops streak the glass, each one catching the city lights like scattered jewels. Samuel rose to refill the tea. You know, he said, his tone light again, the first cup I ever made for you tasted terrible. I was nervous. I smiled. You've improved. I had decades to practice. He placed the cup back in my hand and paused. If you ever decide to start over, do it for yourself, not to prove anyone wrong. I nodded slowly. Starting over doesn't mean forgetting. It means forgiving yourself for staying too long in the wrong rooms. He raised his cup. To the right rooms. I clinked mine gently against his. And the right people. Outside, the lightning flashed once. White, silent, brief. It illuminated the sky for only a second, but that was enough to show how far the horizon reached. In its reflection, I saw two figures in the glass, an old woman no longer ashamed of her silence, and an old friend whose love had matured into reverence. And for the first time, the past didn't hurt, it glowed. 2 weeks passed since the truth came out, and the silence from Rosemont Avenue grew heavier than words could carry. The legal notices had gone through. Samuel's firm handled everything discreetly. I had signed the documents reclaiming the property, though I told him I wasn't ready to move back. Not yet. Some houses need to breathe before you can live in them again, but quiet victories don't stay quiet for long. The first storm arrived as a late-night message from my old neighbor, Mrs. Huang. Talia, her voice whispered through the phone, your son's been pacing outside every night, lights on past midnight. Something's wrong over there. I thanked her gently, hung up, and stared out at the skyline. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it echoes. The next morning, Samuel was reading the paper when I told him. He's unraveling, he said softly. Guilt has a strange way of collecting interest. "I didn't want to destroy him," I murmured. "Just stop pretending I owed him my silence." Samuel nodded. "And that's exactly what you did." Still, I couldn't help but wonder what my absence had done to the house that once felt so alive. A few days later, an email arrived from Lucas. No greeting, no apology, just a single line. "You've humiliated me. Hope you're satisfied." I read it twice, then closed the laptop without replying. Some messages answer themselves through their emptiness. That same week, the family's cracks widened into fractures. Mrs. Huang sent another update. "Brianna's yoga business isn't doing well," she said. "The online clients pulled out after the studio renovation stopped." It didn't surprise me. Money earned by cruelty rarely stays. Meanwhile, Aiden's schoolteacher called me one afternoon. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said gently, "Aiden has been quiet lately. He keeps drawing houses with two figures inside, a small boy and a gray-haired woman holding hands." I thanked her, voice steady though my throat felt like glass. That night, I couldn't sleep. I imagined Aiden sitting at the kitchen table, crayons scattered, Brianna scrolling through her phone, Lucas staring blankly at his computer screen. Love, misplaced, always leaves ghosts. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Unknown number. I pressed play. At first, all I heard was shuffling, then a small whisper. "Grandma?" My breath caught. "Mommy? Said I can't call you anymore. She said it makes Daddy upset. But I miss you. The house isn't happy when you're not here. I hid my bear where you used to sit, so it doesn't forget you." There was a pause, a sniffle, then his tiny voice again. "Please, don't be sad, Grandma. I'm saving a hug for you." The line clicked off. I pressed my hand against my chest as if I could keep my heart from spilling through my ribs. Tears didn't come. They'd learned better discipline by now. But my breath trembled like old lace in the wind. Samuel found me an hour later, still sitting on the couch, phone in hand. "What happened?" he asked softly. I replayed the message. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable but his eyes damp. When it ended, he said, "Children always know which part of love is real." I nodded. He's paying the price for their pride. Samuel sat beside me. "Would you like to go see him?" "No," I said quietly. "That would only make things worse for now. They need to sit in the silence they built." He studied me for a moment, then said, "You're stronger than anyone gives you credit for." "I just learned how to breathe differently," I said. "When love is taken from you, air has to become enough." Days passed, marked by headlines and sunlight, but not by peace. Word spread among Lucas's business partners about his domestic trouble. Deals slipped away. A small local newspaper even ran a short piece about an inheritance dispute resolved in favor of an elderly widow. He must have read it. His name wasn't printed, but shame recognizes its reflection. I imagined him sitting in his office, sleepless, scrolling through property listings he could no longer afford, wondering how a mother's quiet could dismantle what his arrogance built. Brianna, according to Mrs. Huang, had thrown herself into work, filling every silence with live streams and self-help quotes. But the tone of her voice had changed. Even on video, she sounded brittle, like glass trying to sound like crystal. And Aiden, sweet, honest Aiden, had begun spending afternoons at the neighbor's house. Mrs. Huang told me, "He asks to water my rosemary plant every day, says it smells like your kitchen." One evening, as I was reading by the window, I received an email from Aiden's school account. The subject line, "For Grandma." Inside, just one photo, his drawing. A big gray-haired woman and a boy sitting under a tree, holding mugs with little curls of steam rising from them. Beneath it, he typed in crooked letters, "Tea time forever." That was the night I cried quietly, into my hands, not because of pain, but because of the purity that somehow survived it. The next morning, Samuel found me in the kitchen again. He placed a small envelope on the table. "Your lawyer forwarded this," he said, "from Lucas." I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short letter, handwritten, shaky. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I can't sleep. Aiden asks about you every night. Brianna says I brought this on myself, and she's right. The business is failing. The house feels cold. I walk past your room and swear I still smell your lavender soap. I thought control would make me feel powerful. It made me feel nothing. If you want the house, take it. If you want me to disappear, I will. I'm sorry for being the kind of son who made you strong by hurting you. Lucas. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and slipped it back into the envelope. Samuel watched me. What will you do? Nothing, I said. Forgiveness isn't an event. It's a temperature. You let people warm themselves when they're ready. He nodded approvingly. You always find poetry in truth. It's survival, I said quietly. That night, before bed, I played Aiden's voicemail once more. The small crack in his voice, the bravery in his whisper. It became my lullaby. As I drifted to sleep, I thought of how cycles turn. The arrogant learn humility, the loud learn silence, and the forgotten learn to be remembered. And somewhere in that same city, a little boy held his stuffed bear under the table and whispered to it that Grandma would come back someday. In the dim light of dawn, I finally whispered back, to the air, to the world, to him, I will. But not until love is safe again. When I opened the curtains, the first ray of sun caught the edge of the handkerchief on the dresser, the one with the blue tea. It shimmered faintly, like a small, stubborn promise that some things once sown by love can never fully come undone. The morning after Aiden's message, I woke with a steadiness I hadn't felt since widowhood. Grief had once taught me to survive. Now, clarity taught me to act. I brewed jasmine tea, placed the blue-stitched handkerchief in my purse like a quiet witness, and rode the elevator down with Samuel to meet Andrew Moss. Andrew's office sat high enough to see the river bend. The conference room held a walnut table and a printer that hummed like a distant hive. He greeted me with a measured calm. Mrs. Whitmore, today we drew a clean map. He opened a blue folder, tabs labeled in neat block letters, House, Trust, Vermont, Banking, Authority. We start with the property, he said. Deed confirms sole ownership in your name. We've recorded an affidavit of ownership, rescinded your son's management authority, and filed notice to the agent who attempted the private sale. Any further attempt will expose him and the broker to liability. Paper slid toward me. Chain of title summary, certified copy of the deed, county stamp in red. I traced the seal with one finger, not for drama, but to remind my body this was real. Next, the trust, Andrew continued. Your husband's shares matured last year. Distributions were never claimed. We've transferred them to a new account in your name. You'll receive quarterly income. We recommend a revocable living trust to centralize assets and avoid probate. It will also allow you to appoint a successor trustee who actually respects your wishes. I glanced at Samuel. He did not speak for me. He nodded for me to speak for myself. Draft it with 2 conditions, I said. First, no asset may be sold to fund vanity. Second, any gift to family must be tied to responsibility, work, therapy, or care. Andrew wrote, pen whispering, clear and enforceable. He turned to the next tab. Vermont property, a small cabin paid in full, taxes current. We can keep or donate. Your choice. The image appeared without effort. A porch, a kettle, Aiden drawing bears at a wooden table. Keep it, I said. Some places deserve a second life. Andrew nodded. Finally, legal boundaries. You asked for remedies that correct, not punish. We can do the following. He numbered each item, steady as stitching. 1. Issue a cease and desist letter to your son regarding misrepresentation and unauthorized attempts to convey the house. 2. Serve a formal notice establishing your possession rights. Change the locks through a bonded locksmith, with police standby if you prefer. 3. Rather than eviction, offer a transitional license agreement. 30 days, no rent, clear rules. No harassment, no disposal of your property, respectful conduct. 4. File a petition for grandparent visitation. You have evidence of a positive relationship. Teacher statements, drawings, voicemail. 5. Restore your legal autonomy. Revoke any power of attorney you signed under pressure. Register medical and financial directives naming people you trust. I breathed in, The air did not cut. Do it all. But the transitional license must feel humane. I won't throw my son onto the sidewalk. I just won't be erased from my own doorway. Andrew's eyes softened. We'll write it with dignity. He slid a final document to me. This is the rescission of management authority you gave him years ago. Once you sign, he can no longer claim to act for you. The pen felt heavier than it looked. I signed. The notary stamped. The room clicked into a new alignment. The printer released copies like small white flags. Last question, Andrew said gently. Do you want a restraining order? I shook my head. Not yet. I want responsibility, not handcuffs. If he crosses a line, I will reconsider. Samuel rested his hand near mine. Gnawed on it. You've drawn a clear border without building a wall. Silence, I said, does not mean submission. It means I waited until words could do the work. Andrew smiled at that. Then let the record speak. He gathered the papers, stacked them square, and slid them into a leather portfolio. We'll courier the notices by end of day. When we stepped back into the hallway, afternoon light angled across the carpet like folded linen. I felt taller, though age had not returned an inch. In the elevator, I caught my reflection. The same woman, but finally standing on her own side. Samuel broke the quiet. How do you feel? Like my breath has a spine. He laughed softly. That is the best definition of justice I've heard. We ate lunch in a small cafe that did not rush us. I signed the revocation of power of attorney, initiated the transitional license terms, and wrote a letter to be hand-delivered with the notices. It was short and exact. Lucas, this house is mine. That is fact, not fury. You may remain 30 days under the enclosed license. During that time, there will be no sale attempts, no removal of my belongings, no interference with my legal rights. A locksmith will rekey the exterior doors tomorrow. You will receive copies. Brianna may not block Aiden from speaking to me. I will petition if needed. I am not punishing you. I am choosing fairness where I once chose silence. Silence does not mean submission. It means I came to the table when I was ready to use a pen instead of tears. Mom. I reread it once and sealed the envelope. Samuel watched my hands. A steady signature, he said. Practice, I answered. Years of signing permission, slips, and delivery receipts. Today, I signed for myself. Back at the penthouse, Andrew called to confirm service. Documents delivered, he reported. Your son took them without comment. The agent responded with an apology and a confirmation of withdrawal. The county clerk posted your affidavit. I thanked him, ended the call, and opened the window an inch. Down below, the city exhaled. Up here, I did too. Night approached gently, without drama. I made tea, steam lifted like a benediction. I set the handkerchief across my knee. The blue tea shone under the lamplight, imperfect and proud. I spoke to it, or perhaps to the girl who stitched it, or to the woman who forgot to demand respect. We're done apologizing for taking up room. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Moments later, a notification. One new message. I pressed play. Lucas's voice, raw. Mom, I got the papers. I won't fight them. I'm sorry. I don't know when I became a man who needed his mother to save him from himself. If you'll let me, I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. If you won't, I understand. I want Aiden to hear your voice again. I sat with that. Not triumph, not relief. Something simpler. Alignment. Paper catching up to the truth. I texted Andrew, draft a simple agreement for nightly calls with Aiden, 10 minutes, non-negotiable. He replied within minutes, on it. Samuel returned from a late meeting carrying fresh jasmine. He saw my face and didn't ask for the story. He poured the water and handed me the cup. We stood at the window while the city stitched lights into the dark. I didn't punish him, I said. No, Samuel answered. You parented him, with law as your lullaby. I lifted the cup. To the borders that bless. He lifted his. To silence that chooses its moment. I drank. The heat traveled through my ribs and settled where fear used to live. I was not running anymore. I was home in the one country that cannot be sold, my own name. It was a Tuesday morning when Lucas called. His voice came through the line, hesitant, brittle. "Mom, can we meet?" The air in my kitchen stilled. For weeks we had spoken only through lawyers and silence. I almost said no, but something in his tone, thin, not defensive, just tired, made me agree. "Same cafe as before," I said, 10 o'clock. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window. He looked smaller somehow, like a man wearing clothes borrowed from a former self. His hands fidgeted around a cup of coffee gone cold. He stood when he saw me, awkwardly. "You look good," he said. I nodded. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "Work's been rough, and Brianna—" He trailed off, staring out the window. "She moved in with her sister last week, took Aiden with her." My chest tightened, but I kept my face steady. "I see." He looked back at me. "Mom, I didn't call you to talk about that. His voice cracked. "I need help. Financially. The company's falling apart. Investors pulled out. I've tried everything." There it was. The plea he'd never voiced. The one his pride once kept chained. "How much?" I asked. "Enough to keep things afloat," he said quickly. "Just until I can sell the business. You have that trust now, right? From Dad's shares, you could loan me something. Temporarily." He said it like a man asking for air, not realizing he'd already learned how to breathe in other people's lungs. I reached into my leather folder and placed a single document on the table. My certified deed to the house on Rosemont Avenue. "This," I said, sliding it toward him, "is the only thing I brought." He frowned. "Mom, I don't need the house. I need cash." I held his gaze. "You think they're different?" He blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said quietly, "you keep asking for things that look like money, but what you really want is control. You wanted the house not because you loved it, but because it made you feel powerful. And now you want my savings to buy back a version of yourself that never existed." His face flushed. "That's not fair." "Fairness," I said, "was never the problem. Respect was." He exhaled hard, sitting back. "You think I don't regret what I did? I wake up every night hearing your suitcase wheels on the floor. I see your room empty, your chair gone. I hate myself for it. But what do you want from me now? Punishment?" "No," I said. "Boundaries." He stared at me, eyes glassy. "You always were better at words." "I had to be," I replied. Silence only worked until people mistook it for weakness. He looked down at the deed, tracing the embossed seal with a trembling finger. "So what now? You keep the house? Live there alone?" I smiled faintly. "No, I'm donating it." He froze. "What?" "There's a women's shelter in town. They help widows, mothers, women rebuilding after loss. The house will be their transitional home. I've already signed the papers. The trust will handle maintenance. It will outlive all of us." His jaw tightened. "You're giving it away? The home I grew up in?" "The home I built," I corrected. "You walked through its doors, but you never carried its weight." He swallowed. "You could have just given it back to me." "That's exactly what I'm doing," I said softly. "I'm giving it back to the world. The part of you that still remembers kindness will understand that one day." He looked at me then, not angry, not pleading, just hollowed by the realization that power had never equaled peace. After a long pause, he whispered, "I thought you wanted reconciliation." "I do," I said, "but not as property, as people." He shook his head. "You're really not giving me anything?" "I already did," I said. "I gave you life, education, shelter, time, and forgiveness you never asked for. What you do with that is yours alone." He rubbed his eyes, shoulders sagging. "I didn't think you'd ever stop loving me." "I didn't," I answered. "I just stopped funding my own erasure." That broke him more than anger ever could. His lip quivered, his hand reached for mine but stopped halfway, unsure of permission. I didn't pull away, but I didn't reach either. "You're saying no," he whispered. "I'm saying enough." We sat in silence. Around us, the cafe hummed with quiet chatter, spoons stirring, milk steaming. Life continued, unconcerned, mercifully ordinary. Finally, he stood. "I guess that's it then," I nodded. "For now." He looked down at the deed again, still lying between us. "You know," he said, voice unsteady, "I used to think that house was you. The smell of your tea, the quilts you made, the garden. I thought if I owned it, I'd still have you." I met his eyes. "And now?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Now I know I lost both for the same reason. I didn't take care of them." That truth, quiet and painful, was the closest thing to redemption we'd ever share. He slid the deed back toward me. "You're right, you don't belong to that house. And you don't belong to me either." "No," I said gently, "but I'll always be your mother. That's something ownership can't touch." He nodded once, almost bowing, then turned and walked out. The bell above the door chimed, small and final. I sat there for a long time, watching sunlight crawl across the table until it reached the edge of the paper. The deed gleamed faintly, no longer as a symbol of possession, but of release. When Samuel arrived later, I told him everything. He listened without comment, then said, "You didn't lose him. You just handed him back to his own choices." "Maybe," I said, "but at least this time I did it standing up." He smiled, proud. "So what now?" "I'm going home," I said simply, "just not to Rosemont Avenue." The cafe door swung open as a breeze passed through. It smelled faintly of roasted beans and freedom. I gathered the papers, the empty cup, and the blue handkerchief from my purse. As I walked out into the morning light, I thought of one sentence that had followed me through every silence, every fight, every courtroom and memory. I am not an object, and I don't belong to that house anymore. This time, it wasn't defense. It was declaration. The video arrived on a rainy Thursday, the kind of gray that makes even glass look tired. I was steeping jasmine when my phone buzzed with a notification from an unlisted number. The preview froze my breath. Aiden's face, blotchy and red, eyes swimming. I pressed play with a thumb that shook but did not spill the tea. The camera angle wobbled. He must have been hiding under his blanket. I could hear muffled voices in the distance. Brianna's clipped syllables, a chair scraping tile. Aiden whispered into the lens, brave and broken. "Grandma, I got in trouble for saying your name at dinner. Mommy said I'm not allowed. Daddy didn't talk. I have to go sit on the stairs. It's cold there." He gulped, swallowing air like it hurt. "I'm not trying to be bad. I just wanted them to remember the Friday cake." A door slammed somewhere behind him. The blanket rustled. He flinched without crying out. Even his fear had learned to be quiet. "Please don't be mad at me," he said, rushing. "I can be brave like the bear. I'll wait in my room and make a fort. If I whisper, can you still hear me?" The video ended mid-breath. The kettle clicked behind me. I didn't turn. I held the phone like a bird too stunned to fly, then set it down on the counter as if sound alone could bruise it further. The old ache rose, hot, insistent, but I kept my face level. Crying is a language. Today I chose another one. Samuel came in without speaking. He took one look at the phone, then at me, and understood. He poured the tea, exactly the way I liked it, then placed his hand near mine, open and patient. "What would you like to do?" "Act," I said, "but not out of fire." I forwarded the video to Andrew with a single line. "Evidence of punitive interference with contact. File immediately." Within minutes, he replied, "On it. Emergency petition for grandparent visitation, neutral site, temporary order. Paper would move where shouting could not when the..." Tremor in my chest eased. I carried the tea to the window and watched the rain gather on the glass. Each drop slid downward, merging into another, becoming more than itself. I thought of Aiden learning to swallow his voice to keep the peace that never fed him. I thought of my own years of swallowing until silence mistook itself for love. The phone buzzed again. A second video, shorter. Aiden's face filled the frame, cheeks still wet, whispering so softly I had to hold the speaker against my pulse. "Grandma, don't come if they're mad. I don't want them to be mean to you. I'll just think the cake in my head, okay?" I closed my eyes, placed the blue handkerchief in my palm, and breathed. When I opened them, the city was still there, indifferent and dependable. I recorded a reply, steady and warm. "Sweetheart, I hear you. You are not bad for remembering love. You are brave. I'm drinking tea and thinking of you stirring batter with your serious face. Ba dang se ngonyak hak chow." I let the words sit, soft but certain. That means Grandma is building another home for you, a home that is safe for our stories. I will not let anger do the building. I will let care do it. Can you keep your bear company for me tonight? I hit send before my courage could ask for permission. Then I called Andrew. "File the petition today," I said. "Request the earliest hearing. I want a temporary order for visits in a neutral setting, library, community center, supervised if needed, and add the video as an exhibit." "Already drafting," he said. "You'll have the filing receipt within the hour." I thanked him and hung up. Action can be a lullaby when done right. Samuel set a plate of toast beside my tea. "You're shaking," he said. "I'm choosing not to shatter," I answered. "It takes practice," he nodded. "You're building something larger than a case." "A table," I said. "One where a child can say a grandmother's name without paying for it." Rain thickened. The city softened. I imagined Aiden on his staircase, counting the lines in the wood, deciding which thoughts were safe. I remembered my own staircase years ago when I learned to make grief behave in front of a child. The world isn't saved by big speeches. It's held together by quiet repairs. The filing receipt arrived first. A minute later, a court date, Monday at 9. My chest loosened. Not joy, not victory, alignment. I texted Lucas the simplest truth. "I received a video of Aiden being punished for mentioning me. I have filed for court-ordered visitation. This is not war. It is a boundary." He read it immediately. 3 gray dots appeared, stuttered, disappeared. Silence again. Only this time, it belonged to the right person. That evening, I went to the shelter director with the deed for Rosemont Avenue. We walked through the plan in a small office that smelled of crayons and sanitizer. "We'll call it Talia House," she said, eyes bright. "A place where Friday cake is a ritual, not a memory." I signed the last page with a pen that felt heavier than any gavel. On my way home, the rain thinned to a silver veil. The city exhaled. I thought of the cabin in Vermont waiting for a summer of new hands and stories. I thought of a long table under a maple, mugs warming small fingers. I thought of my name said out loud without consequence. Back at the penthouse, I placed Aiden's videos in a folder on my desktop labeled Proof of Love. Evidence? Yes, but also a map. When pain tries to rewrite a child, you give him landmarks. I brewed a fresh pot and dialed the nightly call number Andrew's agreement had secured. It rang twice. Then I heard it. The quiet intake of breath that always precedes a truth. "Grandma?" Aiden whispered. "I'm here," I said, my voice a blanket. "Is your bear listening?" "He's brave," Aiden replied. "I told him cake doesn't need sugar in your house, it needs stories." I smiled into the phone. "Then we'll bake with both." We spoke about little things that are really the big things. The color of the rain, the way rosemary smells like courage, how forts feel safer with a flashlight and a promise. Before we said goodnight, he asked, "Will the new house have stairs?" "Yes," I said, "but they will never be used for punishment, only for running to the kitchen when the timer dings." He giggled, a small bell in the storm. "Okay, I'll tell the bear." When the call ended, I finally let 2 tears fall. No more, no less. Not because I was broken, because I was mended enough to weep without drowning. Samuel found me again at the window. "You told him you're building another home." "I am," I said, "with doors that remember what they open to." "And walls?" he asked. "Only the kind that keeps weather out, not people." We stood together, watching the city shine through the last threads of rain. Somewhere, a boy and a bear kept vigil under a blanket fort. Somewhere, a judge's calendar had made room for a grandmother's name. Somewhere, an old house waited to become a beginning for women who had learned, as I had, that silence can be a bridge if you walk it with care. I pressed the handkerchief flat on the counter, smoothed the blue tea with my thumb, and spoke softly to the night. "I'm coming, child, not to rescue, to set the table." The window held my reflection, an older woman standing upright in soft light, eyes clear, jaw gentle, crying in silence, yes, but not from helplessness, from the precise mercy of a pivot done on purpose. I didn't announce the sale. I didn't need to. The papers were already signed, the funds already transferred, and the story, my story, had already turned its last quiet page. The house on Rosemont Avenue, once a stage for humiliation and silence, now belonged to no one who would use it for vanity again. The women's shelter had declined ownership, too large, too costly to maintain. But I found another way. Samuel's legal team arranged a discreet buyer, a local foundation that renovates historic homes for community use. They paid fair market value, every cent wired into an escrow account that would never pass through my son's hands. When the funds cleared, I sat in the penthouse kitchen, the same sunlight across the marble, the same orchid still blooming as if time itself obeyed discipline. Samuel poured tea while Andrew placed the transfer documents in front of me. "All signatures verified," Andrew said. "Sale complete. The foundation plans to restore the house this summer." I nodded. "Then let it breathe again. Walls remember they deserve gentler voices." Samuel looked at me with quiet pride. "You didn't just sell a house. You ended a lineage of permission." I smiled faintly. "Permission is the root of most heartbreak." He passed me a sealed folder. "This," he said, "is the trust you asked us to create. For Aiden." I opened it slowly. Inside was the deed to a newly established education fund, the Whitmore Child Empowerment Trust. Initial deposit, every cent from the sale. Beneficiary, Aiden Carter. Trustee, Talia Whitmore. Secondary trustee, Samuel Grant. The clause that mattered most was the one I had written by hand. Funds may only be used for education, housing, or therapy. No withdrawals may be made by parents or guardians without trustee approval. I ran my fingers along the embossed seal. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's repair." Andrew smiled. "Then it's perfect." By afternoon, the bank confirmed the wire transfer. The zeros looked like echoes, symbols of quiet power, clean and final. For years, I had believed justice required confrontation. Now I knew it required precision. That evening, I asked Samuel to drive me to the neighborhood one last time. Rosemont Avenue looked different in the dusk. Smaller, quieter, its sidewalks lined with the same weary trees. When we parked across the street, the windows glowed with the emptiness of a house waiting to be reborn. A moving truck sat in the driveway. Strangers carried out boxes I didn't need to see. The wind smelled faintly of lilacs and wet soil. Samuel waited in silence until I spoke. "I once thought leaving meant losing everything. But sometimes leaving is what gives it value again." He nodded, not intruding. Across the street, Lucas appeared on the porch, phone in hand. He must have heard about the sale. I'd instructed the lawyers not to inform him until the transaction was final. His expression shifted from disbelief to something colder, hurt disguised as outrage. He crossed the street, fast and unsteady. "You sold it?" he demanded, "without telling me?" "Yes," I said simply. "That was my childhood home," he said, voice rising. "You had no right—" I cut him off gently. "Lucas, listen carefully. You keep confusing memory with ownership. That house was never your hostage. It was my labor, my savings, my sacrifice. It sheltered you when you had nothing, and when you tried to weaponize it against me, I took it back." He stared at me, chest heaving. "You're punishing me." "No," I said, calm as the evening. "I'm protecting what's left of us. There's a difference." He shook his head. "You could have given me a chance to buy it." "Buy it?" I repeated softly. "With what? Remorse? Promises? No, Lucas. You can't purchase integrity after foreclosure." He looked as if the ground had shifted under him. "Then where's the money? Don't tell me you gave it to Samuel's company." I met his eyes steady. "It's in a trust. For Aiden." He blinked. "For him?" "Yes. Every cent will fund his education, his future, his freedom to become better than either of us. You'll have no access, no authority. You can visit the statement at the bank if you doubt me." He laughed once, hollow. "You really think money can fix this?" "No," I said. "Money doesn't fix love. It just keeps the next generation from mistaking cruelty for inheritance." He looked away, hands gripping his hair. "I don't understand you anymore." "You were never meant to," I said softly. "You were meant to learn from me." He exhaled, defeated. "So that's it? You just cut me off?" "I didn't cut you off," I said. "I cut the cord that kept me feeding the same wound." For a long time, neither of us spoke. A bird landed on the power line above us, shaking rain from its feathers. Somewhere behind Lucas, a worker closed the moving truck's door with a low, metallic thud. He finally said, voice breaking, "You always find a way to win." I shook my head. "This isn't winning, Lucas. It's stopping." He stepped back, eyes wet but defiant. "And Aiden? You'll raise him to hate me?" "No," I said. "I'll raise him to understand you." That, more than anything, disarmed him. He stood there for a moment, jaw trembling, then nodded once. A small, reluctant surrender. Without another word, he turned and walked away. I watched him disappear into the shadows, his silhouette shrinking until it was only motion and regret. Samuel waited until he was gone before speaking. "You didn't even raise your voice." "I didn't need to," I said. He heard me this time. We stood for another minute, the street lights flickering to life. I glanced at the house one final time. "He thinks I did this to punish him." "And why did you?" Samuel asked gently. "Because I finally understood something," I said. "Mercy isn't letting people keep what they abused. Mercy is giving them back the truth about themselves." He smiled, proud. "You sound like your husband." "I sound like myself," I corrected. We got back into the car. The headlights swept across the house one last time, catching the sign the new owners had already placed in the yard. Future Learning Center, under restoration. I smiled. "Fitting, isn't it?" Samuel nodded. "Perfectly." As we drove away, the city lights blurred against the windshield like soft constellations. For the first time, I didn't feel exiled from anything. I was free. Of the house, the noise, the endless explanations. When we stopped at a red light, Samuel looked over. "Do you regret it?" I took a slow breath, the kind you hold to memorize peace. "No, I didn't destroy his future. I just refused to fund his cruelty anymore." The light turned green. Freedom, I realized, doesn't shout. It signs its name quietly and walks away. Spring arrived late that year, as if the season itself had waited for permission. The first morning of warmth found me barefoot on the penthouse terrace, sleeves rolled, hands already in soil. Samuel stood beside me, his tie forgotten, kneeling to loosen the earth near the railing. The air smelled of rain and beginnings. Aiden knelt between us, small fingers digging earnestly into the planter box. "Grandma," he asked, "why do we plant trees up high? Don't they get lonely?" I smiled, pressing a seedling into the dirt. They learn to grow toward the light no matter how far from the ground they start. That's not loneliness, sweetheart. That's courage. He nodded as though filing the thought somewhere permanent. The little maple stood upright, trembling in the wind. Behind us, the city shimmered, glass in motion, noise muted by height. For once, even time seemed willing to slow down. Samuel wiped his hands with a towel and handed me a cup of tea. "You know," he said, "this might be the only garden in the city watered by legal victories." I laughed, soft but real. "Then may the roots be strong enough to survive paperwork." He leaned against the balcony wall, watching Aiden hum as he arranged stones around the base of the sapling. "You did it, Talia. You made something bloom out of all that ruin." I looked at the boy crouched in sunlight, the man beside me, the horizon unfolding like a promise. It wasn't ruined, I said. It was pruning. Some branches have to go so the tree can breathe. We worked in silence for a while, the good kind, the kind filled with rhythm instead of distance. When Aiden stood, dirt streaked across his cheek. He held up his small hands proudly. "Grandma, look! We made a home for the roots." "Yes," I said, kneeling to meet his eyes. "And one day when it's taller than you, you'll sit under it and remember that we planted it together." He smiled, missing a tooth, sunlight flashing through the gap. "Can I name it?" "Of course." He thought for a moment, squinting at the leaves. "Hope," he said finally. Samuel's eyes softened. "Perfect choice." I nodded. "Hope it is." Later, while Aiden napped on the couch, Samuel and I sat by the window with tea cooling between us. Below, the city buzzed, unaware that a small family was quietly rewriting its story 45 floors above. Samuel spoke first. "Lucas called me this morning." I set the cup down carefully. "Oh?" "He asked for your address. He said he wanted to return something." I exhaled slowly. "Did you give it to him?" "I told him he already knows where to find you. Whether he climbs or not is his decision." The sun shifted, catching dust motes like tiny lanterns. "Maybe that's enough," I said, "to know the door exists." Samuel studied me for a long time. "You don't hate him." "I can't," I said. "He's my child." But love doesn't have to mean entry. It can mean distance with dignity. He smiled faintly. "You've turned forgiveness into architecture." "Maybe," I said. "I just don't want the bitterness of renting space in my heart. It's already too crowded." In the evening, we found ourselves lighting small candles along the terrace wall. Aiden woke, sleepy-eyed but delighted to see the garden glowing like a constellation. He carried out his bear, now patched at the seams, and placed it beside the sapling. "He'll watch over it," he declared. I tucked a blanket around his shoulders. "Then it's safe." He pointed toward the street below. "Grandma, someone's down there." I followed his gaze. Far below, at the gate of the building, a solitary figure stood under the streetlight, hands in pockets, face turned upward. Even from this height, I knew that stance. Lucas. He didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there staring up as if trying to measure forgiveness by distance. Aiden squinted. "Is that Daddy?" "Yes," I said softly. "Can he come up?" "Not tonight," I whispered. "He's not ready yet." Aiden nodded as though he understood more than he should. "It's okay. We'll save him some tea." I smiled. "That's very kind of you." Down below, Lucas shifted his weight, looked once more toward the terrace, then lowered his head. His silhouette flickered in the glow of passing cars, uncertain, human, small. And then he turned away. Samuel exhaled beside me. "Do you want to call out to him?" I shook my head. "No, he needs to walk home on his own map." The city hummed softly, neon reflecting off puddles from last night's rain. I watched my son vanish into the blur of traffic, swallowed not by punishment, but by consequence. Aiden tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, when people leave, do they come back?" "Sometimes," I said, "but when they don't, we still keep the light on." He looked thoughtful. "So they can see it?" "Yes," I said, brushing soil from his hair. "So they know love didn't vanish. It just learned new boundaries." He nodded, satisfied, and leaned against me. The night air was cool, carrying the faint sweetness of jasmine from the tea still steaming on the table. Samuel rose, stretching, then quietly placed his jacket around my shoulders. "You built a new foundation, Talia, not for a house, for peace." I looked out over the city, lights stretching endlessly like possibilities. "It's strange," I said. "I used to think safety meant walls. Now I think it means open air." He smiled. "You found freedom the way only the kind do, without destroying anything on the way out." I laughed softly. I just finally understood what to stop carrying. The three of us stood together for a moment, man, woman, child, hands brushing soil, hearts still beating towards something gentler. The maple leaves trembled in the night wind, already whispering the sound of tomorrow. I bent down, touching the earth around its stem, whispering a small prayer not of faith, but of gratitude, for growth that didn't ask permission. Below us, the city moved on. Above us, the stars came out one by one, steady and unafraid. I turned to Samuel, to Aiden, to the small flicker of life between them. "Everything that was taken," I said quietly, "has been replaced by what I chose to keep." Samuel looked at me. "And what's that?" "Myself," I said simply. He nodded. "That's enough." Aiden yawned. "Grandma, will the tree still be here when I'm big?" "Yes," I said. "And when you are, I hope you remember that we planted it after the rain." He smiled sleepily, resting his head on my shoulder. Behind us, the door to the penthouse stayed open, light spilling outward, refusing to close on what was finally whole. I looked once more at the empty street where Lucas had stood, at the soft pulse of the city beneath, and at the maple tree that would outlive all of us. And for the first time in a lifetime, I said it, not in defense, not in anger, but in truth. I was once the foundation of a house. Now I am the foundation of my own life.